A new development that would not be good for the Big 12 and ACC.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. West Virginia is heating up on the trail. How ironic is that? Private equity in college sports? No, thank you. That is all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So, been talking a lot, as everybody has recently, about the House v. NCAA lawsuit, the NIL Go Commission that's going to determine fair market value on deals of $600 or more with NIL collectives and all that stuff. And I have said correctly, obviously, I don't say things I don't think are correct, that it's good for the Big 12 and ACC because it does help. It does not completely close the financial gap. But you look at what Texas Tech, who according to a couple of different reports, are going to be spending more than basically anybody else on their football roster this year, or at least they're going to be one of the highest spenders, not just in the Big 12, but in all of college football this season. Closing the gap with the Big 10 and SEC gets easier when you have the restrictions in place that are supposed to come down from the House settlement, that are supposed to be there with this new NIL Go Commission, which is now, I think, up and running. I don't know if everyone's actually informed about how to do that. I saw a tweet from one reporter that said a couple different athletes didn't even know what it was, who she reached out to, and I was going, well, that's not great, but it's the early stages. You're working the kinks out. It's like when you open a new theme park. You're just going to have some logistical issues that you got to figure out. But the latest breaking news along this front, because there's always breaking news, of course, in this crazy world of college football, is that the House v. NCAA settlement, you know, the revolutionary one that Judge Claudia Wilkin sent down? Yeah, that's going to be challenged in court. Not just the NIL. Now, I had said when the NIL Go Commission thing was being proposed and ultimately passed that I thought that would face legal challenges. I think that is on much, much shakier legal ground than, and I'm not a lawyer, just giving my opinion based on a historical examination of the facts, compared to the House v. NCAA settlement. So the House settlement gives back pay to a bunch of athletes, but also allows for up to $20.5 million this year, roughly, in revenue sharing between an athletic department, the revenue that it gets from its athletics with its student athletes. And so if that were to be removed, you'd be back to what we were trending towards before this all came down, which is no cap, no limit. Whoever has the most and is willing to spend the most will have the most expensive rosters. And there's no ceiling that you break through. You just keep going. And you just keep going. You move out of the stratosphere into the troposphere and into the exosphere, maybe. Definitely not a scientist. Into outer space. Out of this gap, you can just go. You can just keep on going. The reason that this is being challenged in court is on Title IX grounds. And I have said that before, that challenge was probably going to arise because the expectation, according to reports, and it makes sense from a revenue standpoint, the expectation is that, you know, a department that is spending, let's say, $20 million on its student athletes, as in direct payments to, you know, be student athletes for the athletic department, about 75 to 85 or maybe even 90% of it would go to football. Now, this is revenue, not scholarship allocation, but it is money being spent by the university. So the lawyers are going to hash this out in court because Title IX, of course, stipulates that everything has to be equal between men's and women's sports. Well, if 75 or 85% of the revenue is going to football, that's not a 50-50 distribution between men's and women's sports. The expectation that I think it was Brandon Marcello had reported about not long ago was, you know, a good number of departments are expected to be 75% football, 15% men's basketball, 5% women's basketball, and 5% everything else. And I understand why that's where the heads of athletic departments would be at on the one hand, but I think it was also kind of easy to see this coming for a while when you knew that this was going to eventually be the situation. Like, yeah, that's probably going to get challenged because there's no way you can argue it's an equitable distribution. The question will be whether it is required to fall under that stature or under the stature. No, that's not the word I'm looking for. Under that statute. That's the word that I'm looking for. I was so close. That's like a Jeopardy clue. Swap a letter. Stature and statute. Pay attention, Jeopardy. I'm thinking of you all the time. Anyway, so whether or not it falls directly under that statute's purview is what they're going to figure out. And so if the House settlement, which was a big deal, I mean a ground-altering, tectonic shift in college sports and how it operates, that just happened and it's already going to be taken to court. How long is that going to take? Your guess is as good as mine. I'm not going to come on here and speculate ad nauseum about how long it'll take them to resolve the matter. But the fact of it is, if that goes away, if the guardrails that are coming in place, which I think are good for the sport and help it be a more level playing field, which college athletics never has been, it never will be fully. No sports league ever will be fully. The lowest payroll in Major League Baseball is the Miami Marlins at $67 million. The Dodgers and the Mets are over $320 million. Okay, it's not now they don't have a salary cap, but even if they had one, yeah, they'd spend into the luxury tax like teams do in the NBA and all that sort of stuff. But I have been arguing for the last couple of weeks here on the show and continue to believe that it's good for the Big 12 and the ACC, who just from their media rights alone, not factoring in everything else, are at a financial disadvantage compared to the Big 10 and SEC. Well, if NIL deals with collectives can't be an unlimited amount for any player at any position and fair market value has to be assessed, that lowers the ceiling. The floor might be the same for what you can offer players, and you still have to go out and raise that money and be willing to spend it on your roster, whichever sport you're talking about. We'll keep it in the football because, you know, the title of the show you see over there on YouTube, Locked On College Football. You still have to be willing to do all of that sort of stuff. But if you put a cap on it, well, suddenly the gap shrinks between those at the top and those at the bottom, and it's easier for those at the bottom to catch up to those who are at the top and be within at least financial striking distance. And the same applies with the revenue sharing. If it can't be more than $20.5 million that you're spending, well, there will be plenty of schools that will get to $20.5 million and they'll spend 15 or 16 million, whatever it costs to put together a top tier football roster. But suddenly, if you remove that particular element of college sports, which has just changed how everything is going to work, and this school over here, insert big name SEC program, can spend 30 million and a Big 12 school can only spend 8, well, that's a pretty sizable talent gap that you're going to accumulate on your roster. So I don't know what the expectation is from, you know, a settlement standpoint, if that's going to be in the cards. I don't know if this goes on for a couple of years, if it lasts for a couple of months. Typically, the legal system works pretty slowly because there's a lot to do, and that's just the way that the cookie crumbles. But this challenge, and I'm just speaking from a football standpoint. I won't speak for other sports. This is a college football show. From a football standpoint, this settlement and a new world that is more regulated, not just the Wild West, is better for the Big 12 and the ACC to keep a better pace with the Big 10 and SEC. If those guardrails get removed, you are in a worse spot, and I don't know what the remedy would be in that situation. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. How curious that West Virginia is heating up on the recruiting trail, because the backyard brawl opponent they always play, Pitt, was just hot. Now it's West Virginia's turn. First, this episode brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds, mostly at whatever Tyrese Halliburton does in any given night. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live. And this year's matchups are already delivering. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop the closer it gets to tip-off. They have killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, no surprise fees, That might be my favorite part of all of it. Game Time is a total game changer. I've used Game Time to go to a comedy show, to go to a sporting event, and guess what? The experience was great. I got a great deal. I knew what to expect. No surprise fees. Tickets right on my phone. Bing, bang, boom. We're good to go. It was phenomenal. You should go check them out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. How ironic that we're talking about West Virginia cooking on the recruiting trail today. Because not long ago in this very program, I was discussing Pitt being red hot on the trail. Who landed? Look, Paul can't handle it. Mountaineer Paul of Locked On West Virginia doesn't want to hear anything about Pitt. I'm sorry, Paul, but they landed 10. They landed 10 commits in a span of about 72 hours. That's newsworthy stuff. But
how many of them were flips, though?
Not as many. Not as many as West Virginia, of course. So why don't we start with who West Virginia flipped from UCF, and then we'll get into some other recruiting talk here with the Mountaineers.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time for West Virginia, and I'll tell you what, I am really happy with the way the Mountaineers have been recruiting. And if you want to, Antoine Sharp is a kid that a little undersized at linebacker, and what they're doing with a lot of these guys is they're playing them in these hybrid roles where they're this hybrid safety linebacker combination that can fly around and do different things in Zach Alley's defense. He's been really successful. He made Oklahoma a better defense. They rose several spots in almost every ranking last year at Oklahoma, and West Virginia paid to get Zach Alley to Morgantown. They did not want to lose him, the Brent Venables protege. So Antoine Sharp is one of those guys that Zach Alley be coaching, considering he coaches linebackers. He's 6'1", he's 220 pounds. He can really run. He's a 4'6" kid that can he's a sideline to sideline kid. Very, very, very solid form tackling. Athletic as hell. But the thing that he needs to work on, in my opinion, is coverage. If you put him up against a bigger tight end or a quick, twitchy receiver, I anticipate that he's going to have to work on some of that. But certainly the 13th commitment, not the worst commitment in the class, and a kid that's going to put himself into position to be a plus linebacker in Morgantown probably about a year into his career.
When a coach gets hired to any job, one of the first things that I think we talk about as people covering the sport is how's he recruiting? What's the talent acquisition sort of looking like? Rich Rodriguez coming to West Virginia is doing so at a time where college football couldn't be more different than when he was first the head coach of the Mountaineers. And I understand that some people might look at the Rich Rod hire and say, you're trying to run it back to what it used to be. I don't know if that'll work. I feel that way a little more about Scott Frost at UCF than I do Rich Rod at West Virginia. And ironically, of course, they're in the same conference. But so far, how do you assess the talent acquisition that Rich Rodriguez has had? Let's just focus on high school recruiting for now. How do you feel he's doing at the moment?
I think they're getting the kids that they want, whether they're highly rated or not. And so based on Rich Rodriguez's past, one thing I know about him with all my bones is that he's an elite evaluator. He is. He took Pat White, a defensive back from Alabama, and everybody wanted to play at defensive back and said, no, you'll be a quarterback. Last year, Cam Vaughn was a quarterback coming out of high school. He turned into a 1,000-yard receiver, well, a few yards short as a freshman for Jack State last year, and will be a star this year for West Virginia. He just knows how to recruit kids that fit what he does. It's unorthodox. He plays with 11, right? I just watched a thing with Urban Meyer the other day where they were talking about how back when he was at Bowling Green and Rich Rod was at where he was at, I think it was Glenville at the time, they would visit back and forth and exchange this philosophy, this weird thing that nobody was doing at that time. And so you had to recruit different to be able to do that. That really hasn't changed. You need more undersized offensive linemen that are athletic, and it's definitely a grueling over the course of let's say 70 snaps in a game against Rich Rodriguez, well, he will test you in every conceivable way. And so the kind of players Rich Rodriguez recruits won't be the same player that Urban Meyer would recruit, if you want to go that way. So I think they're getting the kind of players that they won with before. This is the mantra from Rich Rodriguez for 30 years. He talks about hard-edged. Are you hard-edged? Because they won't play. They don't play. I had the lineman that transferred in from Tennessee tell me he puked 30 times the first day of practice, and he wasn't exaggerating. And I've heard that from every single player. So it's not for the faint of heart. And,
that's some hard work
for that. Yeah, and he's known for this, which is why it didn't work at Michigan, by the way. He went there and tried to take this philosophy to Michigan, where they had plotters on the offensive line and tried to slim those guys down 30 pounds. It just didn't work for the boosters and people seeing all this change. Like, you're trying to run what kind of system, what kind of spread? It just wasn't working. They're getting super athletic DBs, 6'2", 6'1", to play a 3-3-5 style, 4-2-5 style of defense, where Zach Alley, Brent Venables, that style of defense where, like Ali said, you've got basically 10 calls that Mike has to make, but they go to 200 plays, right? So it's fitting which call goes to which play. So it's a super intricate defense. It's super fun defense. It's very effective. It's very aggressive. They were top 5 in blitz percentage last year and have been every year Zach Alley's been a coach pretty much. And so, because we're on the field more, we're not going to pay attention to certain statistics like you would at maybe Iowa, where, they're running a play every 30 seconds. You're going to be on the field more at West Virginia, so that defense is going to look a little bit different. So points per possession is the metric, I think, that you use there. And even though that's a little off topic, just rambling on a little bit, but you know how it goes, Spencer.
I do. I am familiar. I do want to go back to the recruiting question, though. West Virginia right now in the class of 2026 has a top 50 class, which I don't think is, where their full potential is. There's still a long ways to go on the recruiting trail. It'll really fill itself out in the next couple of months. I mean, 2 months from now, we'll be talking about games that are like 10 or 12 days away, which is incredibly exciting, first of all. And second of all, that's when I think recruiting classes will be mostly solidified. There'll be a few names that commit during the season, but year one for Rich Rodriguez and the first full cycle that he'll be a part of in the class of 2026, what are your expectations for the Mountaineers?
They'll jump up some more, like Legend Bay, big-time quarterback, 4-star player. Be looking at West Virginia. He's got Texas A&M, Ohio State, Duke, West Virginia in his top 5 out of North Forney there in Texas. We had Brody McWhorter. Unfortunately, he didn't come because Neil Brown was fired, which is okay because I'll take Rich Rodriguez and not Brody McWhorter. So, and there are several big-time players coming to campus this weekend, and like you said, over the next month that we'll find a lot more about. There is, as I know of right now, in the top 5 for at least 3 other 4-star players. And then there's always a small possibility that we could flip Chris Henry Jr. And I know a lot of people think that he's dead set on Ohio State.
Well, pretty sure he shut down his recruitment.
Well, I know, I get that, but there are still rumblings happening there. You can say it's shut down, but it's not shut down as long as Pac-Man Jones is in the conversation there and pushing him towards West Virginia, which he continues to do. So, and at
that would be one of the biggest recruiting stories I've probably ever covered on this show.
Yeah, and the thing is it's really comes down to money at the end of the day, and Ohio State is definitely paying him to keep him. And I wouldn't be surprised if West Virginia doesn't get competitive there. So we'll see what happens. I've definitely heard a couple of things. Just certain things have to align for it to happen, and we'll see what that comes down to. Like, obviously, we talk about it a lot. Pat McAfee, Ken Kendrick. Ken Kendrick's a billionaire. He owns the Diamondbacks. He's our biggest donor. He's the reason we're successful in baseball. He's a really close friend of Rich Rod. They just had dinner the other day, took pictures together. Pat McAfee obviously will do what it takes. And if Rich Rod really wants somebody, he can get it. Just like with Zach Alley. That was almost a non-negotiable for him. He said it during his press conference before he was hired. Oh, I've got my eye on somebody that's really good. that you guys will be pretty damn shocked when I get him. And he did. Listen, if you asked me to bet money on it, I would say he probably stays at Ohio State. I'm just saying that it's not closed 100% in my opinion. And I'm not anybody super special, but I'll just say, keep your eye on it.
My eye will be kept upon that. If we'll be bringing you back, let's just say, if anything evolves on that front. Mountaineer Paul, Locked On West Virginia, great as always, my man. We gotta set something straight, not just factually, but also opinion wise on something that should not show up to college sports. Let's set the record very straight. Private equity is not going to own UCLA and Penn State athletics. But everybody kind of thought that for about half an hour until all the rebukes came out of that story. Zach Anderson-Yoxheimer of Locked On UCLA is here to discuss. Why? Because this is an interesting concept. It's not new within the last couple of years. The Big 12 has considered it. Boise State might be considering it. And I wasn't actually shocked, Zach, to see initially that I was surprised at Penn State. I wasn't surprised at UCLA pondering, hey, could we have private equity come and be a part of our athletic department? Because notably, UCLA's athletic department is underwater and has been for some time. I think that fueled part of their move to the Big Ten a couple of years ago. It was more money, and there was $100 million in the hole or somewhere in that range. It's not great. Now, again, those reports, according to the UCLA AD himself, are not actually accurate. However, it did kind of pop the question into my head, and I wanted to discuss with you. Is that how UCLA gets out from under the hole one day, or are they just going to wait and kick the can down the road and save in a piggy bank a little at a time?
I think the big thing and the big problem with UCLA is they still have to deal with the public UC regents, right? The big problem when they were trying to go to the Big Ten, they had to get the approval of the UC regents, who's then slapped a $10 million calimony where they had to send the money over to Cal for leaving to go to the Big Ten. So it's not like any decision that they make as a public UC school is going to be easy if they go private funds, if they do all those things, because everything you're going to see when Chip Kelly was there is, he was the highest paid employee in the state of California, right? He's the football coach. That's all the stuff you're going to hear. I just wonder, could UCLA do that as a public school, as a UC school, without too much feedback? I mean, I think that would just bring too many problems. I mean, if you're looking at a simple way to get out from underneath this humongous deficit, then yes, if you can find a way where there's not too many headaches, you absolutely go for it. I just don't think that there's a way, because you would think a simple changing of conferences would be easy. It's crazy. Whatever we think about Pac-12 to Big Ten, you would have thought that was easy. RIP Pac-12. And whatever our thoughts on it, whether it should be or shouldn't be, you would think that would have been easy. And that was extremely difficult to happen. Now you bring in private equity firms, and at the moment, for what I've read, as you mentioned, the UCLA D's come out and publicly said no. I've read from LA Times, even the Sportico article talking about this. Elevate and UCLA only have a ticketing deal. That's all they have at the moment. Now, maybe they're looking for more, maybe they're not, but it's just a fascinating topic that I would think that would be an interesting avenue to look at, Spencer. I just don't think it could realistically happen.
I think the interest is real, hence why we're talking about it on the show. My internal alarm bells go up very quickly at this particular notion. I understand the appeal for any conference, any school, team, whoever that is looking for a quick influx of cash. Okay, but you've already got to deal with donors, and if NIL Go, which I talked about earlier on today's show, sticks around, then the impact of those donors won't ever be zero, but it's definitely going to be reduced if, every NIL deal that goes through a collective has to be approved by, a Deloitte-backed NIL evaluation firm. If you get into the space where you've got all the outside money, people talk a lot about, well, there's so much money in college sports now. It's different. It's changed it. It's a business. It is a lot of those these money is still internal, though. These are not publicly traded entities. You don't have money coming in from the outside that has a particular agenda or that has its own board of directors to try and answer to. I would caution. I was glad to hear that the initial report was rebuked and that UCLA and Penn State are not doing anything more than a ticketing or marketing partnership or anything like that. I don't think there's anything super nefarious there. But these big picture notions that, yeah, we're considering having, money come in. I just, my initial reaction is no, don't like it. I know money can be a problem, but boy, I hope you can find a better way.
I mean, you have to think UCLA, they've been trying to be proactive in many ways, right? Conference reaffiliation and realignment. They're one of the first few schools that got the biggest cut of the money going to the Big Ten. If this is going to be the new wave, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. They're trying to find ways. So you have to applaud UCLA in some sense that they're trying to be creative. I think you and I are both in agreement, Spencer, that maybe this is not the right avenue, but they're trying to think out of the box, at least.
Yeah, and, thinking outside the box isn't the word, but sometimes you do need to keep it in the box. I just think you open up a huge can of worms there that, it can become spilled milk. Once you go down that road, I don't think you can turn back, go the other way, and get it back to the way it was, right?
Just like NIL, right? Just like how NIL was.
It's like NIL. It's like playoff expansion. The playoff will never regress. No, I don't think there's ever been a sports league in the history, at least that I'm aware of, that's ever shrunk their playoffs. It's only been expansion. I think some of that's been good. I think some of that has been not as good. But this is one of those decisions that any athletic department or conference has to look at and go, are we really going to go down this road? Like the Big 12, I think, was the last conference, that popped up in the news as seriously discussing it because, yeah, they're at a financial disadvantage compared to the Big 10 and SEC, not as much with the ACC. But the House settlement, presuming it, survives the legal challenges that appear to be on its way, that's a better avenue towards leveling the playing field, right? That's still keeping the money within the confines of the funds generated by the sport of college football.
I think the $20.5 million, right? That's the money it looks like for each athletic department. That looks like a great leveling factor. And those funds, I think, actually will start right in July. It's the money being paid back to those previous athletes that'll get a little held up from the billions that the NCAA owes in back pay to those other athletes and former athletes. If that's the way to level it, do it. But then what about all these other coaches who have come out and said, Spencer, Chip Kelly, especially when he was at UCLA, or even the Mick Cronin throwing out those ideas that what if we just had like a football only league? Imagine we could do something like that. Yeah. And then, maybe a half basketball only league and then every other sports regional. And we could solve about 90% of the problems. And what are some of these teams in other sports, men's or women's basketball, that are $4 million over budget in their athletic department? And you're like, how are you doing that? Well, because they're flying across the country for a UCLA to Rutgers, right? And not that UCLA's in $4 million over in their women's department, but that's a conference matchup. You could solve a lot of problem and not have to go to private equity if you don't have to fly across the country for a conference matchup every year. I think that would solve a lot of problems.
I completely agree with you there. And you know what else you could do is you could have a return. I know I just said things don't usually go back. It'd be hard, but not impossible. You could have a return to regionality in college football scheduling. I mean, UCLA's schedule this year, look at all the places they got. Like, Vegas for a non-conference game. All right,
they were supposed to have Georgia and Auburn coming up, and they're like, you know what? No, we're going to play Utah and Cal because those are better games.
Because and they also realize, like, our fans don't want to go to a non-conference game, halfway across the like every now and then.
Speak for yourself, Spencer. I mean, hey, I was at LSU. I've been to Tennessee. I've been to Texas A&M. I'm one of those fans that would travel. I think people have destinations, but at some point, like Cal and Utah, those are easy places to travel.
I think one major destination in the regular season per year is okay, but for the conference games, UCLA, I mean, Washington went to Rutgers last year. Oregon is going to Rutgers this year. How many Washington and Oregon fans are going to Piscataway, New Jersey? I'm sure there's some scattered across the East Coast that think it's the greatest thing in the world. But this whole, the more it goes on, I think the more people are going to get tired of it. So maybe we can go back to a better, simpler time. Zach Anderson,
then the show will be Locked On Pac-12, I think, right?
I don't make those decisions. You got
Speaking
me
of not
there.
going back.
You guys, Zach Anderson, Youngsheimer, Locked On UCLA. I appreciate everybody listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.